take a walk with me, not like you used to do. Do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction, change your perspective.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. As you know, I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for stopping by today. Really appreciate that. I think you're really going to get a kick out of today's episode in more ways than one. We are in a new season. So by the way, if you haven't already, can I please just ask a small but yet large favor? Jump right on over right now to opspodcast.com. Feel free to leave a review there on the show. We'd love that. We love reading those. Those are fun. But also, if you want to, you don't have to, but we would love to see you over on the social medias as well. OPS Podcast Show, a little different on the social medias of choice of your choice. That, of course, being Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Again, we are under the, what is it? I think it's handle. Somebody has now finally told me the handle OPS Podcast Show. So a little different than the website, but either way, follow us there and follow our guest too. She, of course, would love that. Oh, I just tipped our hand. Who we're going to have today. That's right. Welcome her in. She, of course, is an award-winning author. She's a dancer. She's a storyteller. In fact, she has her first two nonfiction books called Dolores Likes the River. Well, I'm sure we'll hear more about that down the way. Jesus in Shorts. I didn't know Jesus wore shorts, but apparently we need to dig more into that as well. Both books, by the way, chronicle her struggle with her early life, as well as lessons that she has learned along the way in her 70-year journey with, that's right, Jesus, which spells Jesus. The new podcast host, it's always fun to have a new podcast to listen to. Living What You're Given. That podcast, by the way, is designed to help others live their best life, no matter what age, stage, or situation or circumstance they may be in. She, of course, is from Colorado. Rockies, Denver. We might hear more about that too. She's a native of Colorado as well. In fact, she has never been across the continental divide with her husband too far. At least she's only stayed in the West, which is always fun, right? Because I'm a West Coast guy, so that's fun. But my heart, of course, as you all know, still resides in North Carolina. So for 30 years with her husband, Keith. Help me welcome her. And Laura, how are you today?
This is a good day. It's a wonderful day. And actually, I did live in Denver most of my life. So that's on the east side of the divide. My husband and I have really been fortunate in our years of retirement. We have traveled the world. So I've seen quite a few places. And I got to tell you what, like you love your home, I love mine. This here's Colorado. To me, there's no place like it. I just sit and look out my window someday and I just go, thank you, God, because I know there are a lot of beautiful places, but for me, this is my home.
That's fun, right? So I have never been to Colorado. I've never even been to Denver. So if I were to come out and pay a visit, what would we go and do and hang out together and do, Laura?
Well, you could come to the Western Slope, and my little town's called Montrose. We live in this little town, which isn't really that small anymore. We would hike the Sawans, the famous Sawan Mountains. We have 50-some 14ers. That means 14,000 feet or higher in mountains in this state. Don't know how you like to spend your time. My husband is a fisherman. He is a hunter. I am an avid outdoors person, but I don't hunt, and I like to eat the fish, but I don't really fish anymore. Those are some of the things we would do, because this is Colorado and you have places like Telluride. You have places for wonderful musical and jazz festivals. So that's what you would do if you were here. Depends on how long you're here.
That's fantastic. I love that so much. So getting into this, now I know you have been on a number of shows. In fact, you were interviewed by a very good friend of ours, fan of the show even, Eric Nevins, right? You know that guy pretty well, sort of?
I do. Yeah. He's the guy that talked me into doing podcasting. He's the guy. He's my coach.
I feel like he talks a lot of people into podcasting. So really Eric, thanks so much for talking folks in and off the ledge sometimes from podcasting, or to, when they get stuck. You're a good guy for that. We appreciate that a lot, Eric. But I know you're on Eric's show, but I bet you Eric didn't ask you this question. I just have a feeling.
I have the feeling that I know what you're going to ask, so you go right ahead.
All right. So here we go, Laura. So if we were going to find you in a pair of shoes, what shoes would we maybe find you in?
Depends on the time of year, Neil. So I'm going to tell you, I have practiced for this answer. And that would depend on whether you are talking dress shoes, boots, you are talking sandals, sneakers, workout, or hiking shoes. Now, those are all different sizes. And if you are talking about regular people shoes, we can always talk about dance shoes. So dance shoes would be, what are you talking here? Tapping, clogging, Irish, what are you talking? And if you're talking Irish, are you talking soft or hard shoe? And if you're talking my shoes that come up this time of year, are you talking about elf shoes? Because I am an elf. And so each one has a completely different size, but Elf is a North Pole issue, and so it's called a sklunknull, and it's a North Pole. It's about a 5.5, 6 for elf feet. The other ones are just dependent upon what I'm at, but I'd say 6.5, 7, unless I'm in my Irish dance shoes, and those are a wee bit smaller.
You didn't necessarily have to give us the shoe size, but is there a favorite shoe that you like to wear? Like if we were to find you at your best?
None at all. I love to look at them, but I don't like to wear them. I'm a barefoot girl, but yeah, that's it. You're going to find me in my bare feet all year long. But I think probably my sneakers, those are the most comfortable ones for me now. I can work out and I can do a lot in those.
And is there a brand or style to those sneakers?
Well, I have now been blessed with the need for orthotics, something that many people fear, but don't fear orthotics people because the warranty's up and the parts are falling off. So it's okay. It's okay because every day above ground's a good one. And so I think the reason that I love these are my Skechers, and they're comfortable, and they really actually hold much love for my little beat up dance feet with bunions and fallen arches and, those things. Cause you like athletics. I know you do. And so, that those parts will only be punished for so long. And then you're going to see a little difference in them. So you got to trade in, I think, fashion for comfort now. But Skechers are pretty fashionable these days, so I'm a Skecher girl.
Yeah, I did have to retire a pair of shoes recently because I couldn't wear them because there was no arch support. So I do know exactly what you're referring to on that. So that's fun stuff. Love that a lot, Laura. Love the elf. That's fun. That was so fun. I love that too. That was good stuff. So Laura, getting into your story, to me, when I started again brainstorming about this new season that we're in, and I was kind of sharing a little bit of that with you in the green room, the idea that I believe there is this presence that has, for whatever reason, in some respects, maybe paralyzed us, or some respects been so overpowering to us that it has made it hard for us to really step out into the light because of this overwhelming presence of a shadow. Now, some are interpreting that so many different ways, and I love the synapses firing when people are trying to interpret where I'm going. And I've gotten messages from people saying, listen, what are you looking for? And I'm like, I don't really know. And they're like, well, what about this? I'm like, yeah. They're like, does that fit? I'm like, sounds like you're interpreting it how I want you to, which is how you interpret it, which is the whole joy of this show, right? Their perspective on that question. So, Laura, I ask you, has there been a shadowy figure or a shadowy presence maybe that has been a part of your life? And if so, how so?
Well, I would like to share with you that when we talk about other people's shoes, which I love the title of this podcast, I love the music, I love all of it. I came from a family where there was 2 alcoholic parents, and there were 2 other sisters and me. And I want to start out by saying today, I love my parents. I understand their disease. I know it had nothing to do with me, but that was a many decade journey for me. And so the shadow of fear loomed in me big. And the reason is because, and I talked with another one of our friends, somebody that I was on his show, and we were talking about how redemption works when you come out of a situation like that. And I mean, I was just fighting mad. Don't mess with me. I still tell everybody that I have a temper. It can flare up. And please remember, Neil, I was raised in North Denver. I'm Irish and Italian. I have a black belt in tongue and one whale of an education. So I do not think it's a good idea to mess with me. That was an angry young woman. I don't resort there anymore. And when I feel myself going back there, I move out. Here's the deal. That was all accumulated from years of being the child of alcoholics, who believed she was what was wrong with them, who knew that her next step could be her last, who knew that everything in the world fell on her shoulders to make it right, to make it good. And what happened was I became controlling to the point of where I felt if things didn't go right, I had all control of it. I was queen of the universe for a lot of years until I got fired of that. The thing was, Neil, the pressure that shadow put on me of never being enough because I couldn't keep them sober. I couldn't keep the violence away. I didn't know how to save my own life. Through the grace of God, I lived through it, have written a book. That's what Dolores Like the River is about, the recovery of that. But I also want to tell you that part of that recovery was dancing with the shadow. Stop running. start dancing. Face it. And I didn't do that without help, professional help, spiritual help. And the way that, I knew I always had this thing hanging over me, honestly, literally. Always had a thing hanging over me. And that's what I think it was that we talk about now. So Barry definitely believed that the bad things that happened in the world were probably somehow my fault. And that's a lot of pressure for a kid. It's an incredible amount of destruction for a teen. It's a life of bad choices and trying to numb myself as a young adult. And it's a place of walking into being that angry spiritual refugee as a young woman.
Where do you think all that comes from, though? Because it's easy to say, hey, other people's choices have now affected my life. I know for me, myself, my parents made some bad choices. My mom and I have actually talked about it recently. And I've even said to my mom, like, listen, you did the best you could with what you had. She somehow feels like she's responsible, like she failed us as a parent. I'm like, listen, again, you did the best you could with what you had, with the information you had. And to me, again, it's easy to play the blame game even. And I'm not saying you're blaming your parents by no means. I'm not. But what I am, I guess what I'm trying to ask in that is, why as a kid did you feel somehow responsible to take that on, to take that ownership on, to, in your words, dance with the shadow or even put the shadow on you? Why do you feel like that was so important?
I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I didn't know what I was doing, but I was carrying forth an attitude of everything must be my fault. So therefore things must go well. And if they didn't, it was my fault. And if they did, then I felt good. It was just the way it was coming out of that situation. So it just was. And I think also, you hear your parents say, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't drink. So, and I heard that a lot. My sisters and I have talked about that too.
I guess that's what I was ultimately asking is, did somehow somebody validate that for you? Did somehow somebody put that on you? Or did you as a kid think, I can be a superhero, I can somehow save them, I can somehow step into their life, I can be the adult, because clearly they don't know how to adult, so I can then come in and be the adult. Do you feel like that in any way? Or back to your statement that you said, if you weren't this way, we wouldn't drink, which by the way is terrible.
It is, but please understand that a lot of this is, and if somebody out there is listening and understands what I'm saying, this is all now something to be unpacked and learned about. Because once we have education in whatever it is, you have to have a master's degree in this stuff, but whatever it is that is plaguing us, and we all have something, whether we know it or not, I think most of us do have something kind of chomping at our backside. And I think that, yes, those were things that were said. As you have said, they did the best they could. But how am I going to know that at 17, 18, 19, 26 years old, unless I begin to reach out for the help I need to find out what's going on here? I don't want to live like this anymore. And that came about because I met Jesus. See, we didn't grow up in a home where there was any kind of religious background. In fact, to add insult to injury, and this is not a pity pot, this is a collection of things that shaped who I am. And that was, we were in what we call a spiritually mixed marriage. So my father was of one faith, my mother was of another. My mother was divorced. Therefore, he was excommunicated. And us kiddos, to our face, were told we had no place in the kingdom of God. We were not legitimate. Now, at 10 years old, there's no way to unpack that. There's no way to understand that that's not just flat crappy. So you have to live. And I just heard somebody talk about this today, a wonderful spiritual leader who said, some people don't make it. Some people go right back down that same road, addiction or destruction or suicide. It really is something that we have to get in touch with. We have to acknowledge it. And we have to say, I agree with you. You can't play the blame game, because what happened to me as a child was not my choice. What I do with it is nothing but my choice. So there's where I'm at with all of that.
What happens if you don't defeat the shadow? What happens if you allowed the shadow to take over your life? Have you ever thought about that in any way?
I don't know. That's as honest as I can be with you. I don't know what happens. I think I've seen it in some people who have been debilitated by their past or by what's happened to them, but I can't judge them. I don't know how bad it was. I don't know what they chose to do with it. All I know is that I, not of my own accord, I did not go down the path of being what I came from. But I started down it and I decided, no, I'm not going to be in bars every single night. No, that's not going to happen. The alcohol was not necessarily the shadow maker. And as anybody will tell you who's in recovery, alcohol is a symptom and it's covering up for something else. So as I began to understand what happened, I was turned off that road, Neil. So I can't tell you what would have happened. I can't tell you what would have happened if I'd have been tall, blonde, and on the runway. Not that I wanted to be. It didn't look like that good to me, but hey, 4'11", cute little Italian Irish that I am. So, I can't tell you what would have happened if what happened.
But I guess in my mind, you obviously saw some signs that said, listen, I don't want to get off that off ramp. I don't want anything to do with that area. I don't want to go there. And so I think it's fair and even good to say, like, listen, I don't know where I would have been because I don't even want to entertain that. How did you meet, and we'll air quote, the proverbial shadow in your mind?
Well, as I told you, when I was 26, I became a Christian, and I ended up with a mentor, Dolores, and she helped me to understand one thing. I'm loved. I'm lovable. I'm worthy. So that's 3 things in one. Those are the things that began to throw light on the shadows. But I never really totally unpacked it until I was in grad school. I was in my 50s, okay? And I was doing, I may have even been older than that. I'm trying to think. I graduated from my master's degree in 2009. So you guys get to do the math. I don't like math. My master's degree, I decided I've been a dancer for a long time, and that's a whole different story. But I wanted to do something about interpretive dance. And so I took several classes on the psychology of creativity. Now, how does that work out? Well, it says that we start looking at the pieces of us that are creative, which, by the way, everybody is creative. We're created in the image of the great creator. We can't not be creative. I had this class on psychology, creativity. And in this class, the professor, Dr. Lincoln, said, we're going to get in touch with some different pieces of our minds and our creativity. And she brought us a book by Parker Palmer called Let Your Life Speak. Now, I know this is controversial and some people may not like it, and that's okay. I have no control over that. And another one by a lady named Debbie, and I'm trying to think, what was her last name? Debbie Ford, who talked about the shadow. There's also other books like Dancing with the Shadow and things like that. And as I began to walk into what was going on in these books, understanding most people create out of a shadow. Boom. How about that? You look at some of the most prolific creative celebrities in our day. I'm thinking Robin Williams. I'm thinking of, Jonathan Winters. That's way, way back. I'm talking about some of our musicians, deeply, deeply shadowed individuals. And out of that came the art. Whether you like them or not, I don't get to judge them. I leave that for people who have more credentials in that area. But I feel like I understood what she was saying, and I began to do a study on the shadows in my life. And I realized that I was so restricted in my thinking. For example, I'm a dancer. I'm not a fine artist. I'm a dancer. Well, why aren't you a fine artist? Well, I can't do that. I can't do that. So I had this class with this lady, and she put on music and she gave us all this big drawing tablet thing. And she said, you close your eyes, and all these people around me, Neil, they're all doing these beautiful pictures. Me, I'm doing like this little half-baked dahlia in the corner. And she said, just put on your heart. That's all I want you to wear. Your heart. And we're standing there. She said, close your eyes. And she came behind me and she put on this beautiful piece of music. And she took my hand and she kept moving my hand over the paper with a piece of chalk, different pieces. And I'm telling you, I began to dance with the shadow that said, I can't do that. And that's when I began to dance with that shadow. Picture, ugliest thing you ever saw in your life. Oh my gosh, it would make the ugly stick run. But the fact was, Neil, the shadow came out in the light and said, well, I guess you can. Just had to do it through a different lens. And that's how I did it. And from then on, I started doing shadow work to start unpacking. I'd been in recovery a long time for the effects of the alcoholism. So I'd already come to peace and understanding and forgiveness. Those are huge pieces for our parents. And hopefully my kids will too. I hope that answers your question. It's a nebulous field. And sometimes it's like talking about something people just flat can't get. And there are lots of things in this world I can't understand that I didn't live, that I didn't walk. And so I don't understand them. And all I ask is people respect it especially right now in our country when we have so much opioid addiction. And I understand the drug addiction and the alcoholism numbers soared during COVID. And I understand, as perhaps a few others can, that there's nothing worse than living in a shadow and being told it isn't valid. So the people who live on the periphery of those diseases, they've got some issues too.
I've been doing this show now 3 years almost. And in my mind, as weird as it sounds, I believe everyone's story has value.
Mm-hmm.
Now, value is obviously very subjective. We can put a value on anything. I can put a value on those shoes that sit behind me. There is a value on those. Those are $200 shoes that sit on a shelf that I just look at. Those have a value. Somebody decided to put a value on that. But I also think stories sometimes are hard to put a value on because I think some stories are, in fact, priceless. There's no value you can put on them. But when I hear you kind of articulate back the shadow and I hear you kind of share back that moment where you really tapped into that moment, if we can we go back to that art room? Is that a possibility? So first off, I am the least probably artistic person you will ever meet. In fact, I have a friend, he's a very good friend of mine, his name's Nick, and he has never lost at Pictionary. And he's telling me this one night as we go to his house for dinner. This is going somewhere, I promise. And so we sit down and I look at him, and I've been friends with this guy for years. And I was like, listen, Nick, I am terrible at Pictionary. I am not an artist. And he's like, I've never lost. You'll be fine. Just draw what's on the, and he's a man of few words. And so for him to articulate, like, just draw what's on the card, I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, I can't make my brain draw a teddy bear. Like, I can't. I just physically cannot do that. He's like, we'll be fine. We got demolished at Pictionary. And I feel terrible. So the idea of somebody having their hand, helping me with Pictionary, I don't think that would even help me. For me, when I hear that, I'm like, man, that would be amazing if someone could do that. In that, what were you feeling? What were you experiencing? Was it, help me understand that a little deeper, if you wouldn't mind. What was that like? Because again, I would love to have somebody draw for me. I would love that.
Well, she wasn't drawing for me, Neil. She was showing me that I could draw through a medium of movement because I move. And folks, you know what it feels like to move back and forth like a reed in the water. And that is what it was. And I liked her. See, we already had a little relationship because I'd had 2 other classes with her. And I knew this woman would not harm me. I knew, just like with God, she was going to do for my best. I knew that. And so I trusted her, like that game of, what is that game kids play where one falls back and somebody catches them? Well,
it's a trust fall, I think is what you're after.
And as you talk about that, I actually still have that picture. I'm not going to show it to you, but I do have it because all she wanted me to see was that the shadow lies and says there's only one way to look. There's only one way to do. There's only one way to create. There's only one way to have value. She was showing me that through what I knew, which is movement, that I could create other things in other ways and I could be free. And the shadow had to back down. That's what I call it, dancing with the shadow. That's how I felt. I was trusting her. And please, I was in a class of younger people because I went back to school, as I said, in my 50s. They were wonderfully talented artists, people who really could really draw and paint and these things. But me, I came in and I was a little dancer. So let me tell you, as that class wore on, every time she said, okay, today we're gonna draw something, or today we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. I know I gave up the outcome because the shadow says I'm responsible for the outcome. And that brings us right back where we started. I'm always responsible for the outcome. That is just not true. I had a Scottish grandmother and she always said, well, that's just a lot of crap. And that was, but I didn't know that. I always thought there's only one way to do things. There's only the right way. You've heard people say, if you want something done, do it yourself. Or there are 2 ways to do it, my way and the wrong way. People just say things like that. And I think kids, although we're resilient as children, we absorb a lot. And it takes a certain level of maturity. It takes a certain level of trust to walk into a new way to do things. My favorite movie is Paint Your Wagon. And in Paint Your Wagon, there's a woman who has been married. The gentleman she's with has 2 wives. And the guy is going to sell her. He needs money. So he's selling her to Lee Marvin, who's an absolute nightmare. He's a drug in this movie. A lovely Marvin. Anyway, he says to her, well, if you're sure that's what you want. And she said, yeah, sell me. Go ahead. He said, but you don't know what you'll get. She said, no, but I know what I've had.
And so for me, when I hear all of this and I hear, trauma and childhood trauma, and I hear, a level of trying to keep the family afloat, when I hear expectations falling on you, and I hear this, maybe not enough. We just came out of that series of people not feeling like they were enough. Powerful series, at least in my mind. We had a lot of powerful episodes on that season. And so for me, when again, coming into this new season, I still feel like that for some people, there is a shadow still of not feeling enough.
Exactly.
And having this overwhelming feeling like no matter what I do, it's never enough. Is that true of you? And if so, maybe speak to that.
It was true of me, Neil, very definitely. When I've heard a couple of those episodes, and I'll hear more as time goes on. But here's the deal: they are all related. It is interwoven. We are simple but complicated people. That is how it works. And there are so many things that can add, subtract, can be part of us, or can be left behind. Sometimes they're choices. The part of not being enough is always, I would think, from what I heard and what I've studied a wee bit, that's coming from some brokenness somewhere. And that's what I heard. And that brokenness, there's a Japanese art called kintsugi, and it is where they take broken vessels and they mold them back together with gold. And the scars are the beauty of the piece. That's what I can say to you. Never enough. And the shadow, as I worked through it, I've understood that shadow was there. That brokenness was there. So I could walk forward now, and I could be the mentor to other people as I was mentored to say, oh yeah, you broken, you bleeding, you scarred, and all those scars are going to be used to help other people. Kinsugi, I believe it's called kintsugi. There's a wonderful friend of mine named Alan Arnold. He wrote a book called The Story of Wit, and he talks about this art and on the front of it, and it's a vessel. And friends, please forgive me if I have mispronounced that. I very likely could have. It starts with a K, and it is the art of taking that which is broken, molding it back together, and they actually use precious metals like gold and silver, and they reattach things to where it comes back. It'll never be in its normal form. Can never be in the normal form. But what it does now is more beautiful because it has its beautiful scars. And that's how I see the shadow. I see the shadow as the one who is helping me, or the ones, I don't know how many there were, who were helping me to find myself into the beautiful vessel I am today. I don't hide my scars, Neil. I spend a lot of time talking to people in recovery, children of alcoholics, parents of alcoholics. I spend a lot of time showing my scars, not as a pity pot. Sympathy does not help me at all, but as an inspirational voice to say, I made it. You can make it too, but it's work.
I've heard people say, well, they can look down at their hands. Maybe they've cut their hand open, or maybe they had stitches as a kid, or there's a mark on their leg from, when they tried to do a skateboard trick when they were younger. I'm sure all of us have a few scars. Evel Knievel was a little bit in my area. So some of us still have those Evel Knievel scars. For me, when I think about what you're saying there, and I hear it and I process it through, what I wonder about though, is if those scars were not in our life, if those scars never happened, are we still able to, we'll not make it a we, we'll make it a you, because we could talk all day long. We, like the little pig all over the place. Doesn't matter. We want a me in this moment. So for you in this moment, when you look back on those scars, what scar for you has been the most impactful for you that you're like, man, that's the one I look at and I go, that's the one that I know can help the most? What scar is that for you?
That scar for me would be exactly what we're talking about right now. Growing up believing I was a throwaway. I wasn't a throwaway. I'm not a throwaway. And in our day and age right now, where we live, the time we live in, some of the things we're seeing happening, what is the first thing that comes out when people disagree? It's called the shame bomb. Well, you don't think like me, you're an idiot. Well, it's easy to retreat back into that little corner and say, wow, I must be an idiot. For me, had I not had those scars, I don't know if I'd have learned how to navigate the world I'm navigating right now. We're navigating right now, and say, you know what? It's water off a duck's back. And if you've never heard that saying before, that's an old 1940s or 1930s saying. My folks used to say it all the time. And we live by a lot of ducks. Over here, we have a beautiful pond about a block from our home. We go out there and we watch them. They're in the water. They need the water. They're on top of the water. They eat in the water. They do everything in the water. They get out and they shake it off, because if they let it on them too much, they'll drown. They won't be able to make it. And that is how I see it now. It's a scar that allows me to have water off a duck's back when the unkindness comes, when the shame is thrown, when people, anybody, and myself, when I get down on myself. What's that saying? When I get down, I look up, I stand up, I shake it off, I straighten my crown, and I walk on. And that's exactly what my shadows have given me. That's what my scars have given me. And that's what I want to offer to other people.
I think it's strong and powerful to encourage people to walk on. Despite the pain, despite the,
That's right.
you know, the scars, despite the heartache sometimes that might come with that, despite the overwhelming pressure, is to walk out into the light and really, truly have that moment of freedom. And Laura, I think that's beautiful to say. So thank you for sharing that nugget.
You got it. It's there. It's free.
So Laura, as we wrap up today, I want to give you an opportunity right now. If somebody's listening to you right now and they're like, you know what she is saying is impacting me. I do have some shadows in my life, like that groundhog. I want to get past the winter. I want to move into the spring where it's warmer, where things are becoming back in bloom and they're not looking so, you know, dismal and down and dark. How can people reach out to you? And what would you say in this moment to those folks?
I would say the shadow is not there to destroy you. The shadow is there to refine you. I would say that there are so many ways to get help. If you are from what I'm from, look online for counselors that can help you. Be honest, be open. There's no more reason to hide. Find somebody who can help. I couldn't have done this on my own. I don't know too many people who could. And then look for support groups. But first of all, help yourself. Do for yourself. You're worth it. Walk into that counselor's office. Walk into that support group. Walk into somebody who can help you unpack this in a safe way. Because I'll tell you what, it can get real ugly once this stuff starts coming out. So you don't want to do it by yourself. You are worth so much more. That's what I would say, Neil. There's a start for you. You know, take care of yourself. You're worth it. No matter where you've been or what you've done or how you feel or any of that stuff, man, you're worth it.
That's so powerful. Again, that reminder. I love it so much. So Laura, before we let you go, I feel like we got to play a game together. You feel like a game? You up for that?
I'm always up for a game.
All right. So here's our game. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Senseless. And it's this kind of silly game we kind of wrap up the show with. But here we go. So here's our game, Senseless. My famous North Carolina cup. And so I'm going to roll. You're okay with me rolling on your behalf, right?
Roll on my behalf. Sure.
All right. Just checking. I don't want to roll if you wanted to roll for yourself. But
Nope.
Here we go. Ooh, I love it when this happens. Here we go. Number 6. Speaking of 6. Yeah, we don't have 6 senses. Some people think we do, but we don't. I promise. We only have 5.
Oh, but now that you say that, my mind opens up. Like Hercule Poirot says, the little gray cells have been stimulated. And I am saying, you bet I think there's a 6th sense. Now, it might be women's intuition, though, Neil. That may exclude you.
All right. So there could be a 6th sense. That does exclude me. But anyway, we like to use the 6 as our wild card. So here we go. Wild card is this: dinner or a meal. Some people don't like dinner. So a meal of your choice: breakfast, lunch, dinner, brunch, a meal, maybe a snack. Who knows? Maybe it's a snack pack with goldfish crackers. I don't know. Back in the day, we used to have goldfish crackers a lot. So maybe I'm thinking about goldfish crackers right now in this moment. Thank you, Petridge Farms, for that image. But anyway, so here we go. So a meal or a snack of some sort or whatever, however you interpret that. Dinner, one person, only one. Don't try to sneak in others. This is a one table reservation for you and one other person, dead or alive. Who is it with and why?
Who is it
with?
with?
And what are you guys having?
Does my husband not get to be on that?
You only get one. There's not like 3 chairs at this table. There's you at the table and this mystery guest, dead or alive, one person. Who's it going to be?
Alan Payton.
Alan Payton. I don't know that person.
He wrote Cry the Beloved Country, Too Late the Phalarope. He was an activist for apartheid to dismiss. He was a white man. And if you ever want to read a book that really talks about racism and the division of classes, South Africa, Cry the Beloved Country. And I would sit down and I would say to him, dude, you were really fighting your people. You were fighting a cause that's still being fought. You were talking truth to power. How did you do that? How'd you do that? And how'd you keep going? How'd you keep going? Cry the Beloved Country is a Christian book. It's about a pastor. It's about his son, his family. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And I have learned so much from reading fiction as well as nonfiction. I do write nonfiction, but this gentleman, that's who it would be. He was a white man, an African. And what would we eat? Well, depends.
Yeah, what would you eat?
If he's at my house, we're going to eat Papa Carvello's famous Italian spaghetti, 9-hour sauce. That's right. And some nice, we're going to eat that sauce, and we're going to have us some pasta and some good Chianti, and we're going to have us some bread, and we're going to break bread, and we're going to talk about how he kept going, what helped him to walk through, and not only walk through the shadows of what he must have been brought up as a white man, but how did he face the shadows that other people needed to see?
That's why I like that number 6 question, because one, I get educated on who's in people's heads. Yeah, normal answer is like, well, I think it would be Jesus, but I always ask people to stretch that, because that's like a layup. Like, that's a gimme. Come on.
He's at our table every day, and he loves spaghetti, by the way. I'm just saying.
Laura, you're a kick in the pants. I just loved having you on today. Guys and gals, kids and campers alike. What a treat that was, right? What a treat. So here's my question for you as we wrap up today. Are you with Laura? Are you like, if we were going to say Team Laura? I often say that in reference to my wife and I, that, there's Team Elizabeth and there's Team Neil. We've had that debate for years. But right now, I'm going to step out of that. I'm going to ask you, are you Team Laura right now? Are you really on fire and on board with what you're hearing right now? Because here's where I'm at, is I believe right now, and I think she would echo this, I believe that there's somebody right now, and I'm not like a mentalist, I'm not like a psychic, I'm not any of those guys. I'm a guy in Oregon that's obsessed with North Carolina, that loves my wife, loves my daughter, and tries to be the disciple of Jesus that I'm called to be. That's what I am. In case you were wondering, in case you're new to the show, let me help you with that. But what I am going to say is I think she said it very powerfully and impactfully. Is I believe that there is somebody out there listening right now, or someone that's listening right now that still has this overwhelming shadow in their life that they're not enough. That somehow they've created a facade, that somehow they've created this identity, somehow they've created this persona that they're not enough. And they've allowed this shadow to overtake their life. So I'm going to ask you right now, if you know that person, can you just do me a small little favor? Will you just go to them right now in this moment and say, listen, you are enough. And in fact, here's somebody that's willing to help you. Because I bet you if they reached out to Laura, she'd be willing to help. I just know it. She just knows her. I know her heart well enough that she would know that and do that. So find that person today that you can go and help. Do not let a day go by. Do not let a moment pass that you're not willing to help somebody. Be a neighbor to them. Help them like that lady did for Laura so many years ago. That's my challenge for you today. Find that person to help. I bet you can find them if you just look a little hard. Maybe grab your flashlight. They might be hiding in the dark still. With that said, remember this. When you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for listening. And by the way, stay tuned till next week because we're going to walk in other people's shoes.